Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
Coming how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, and welcome back to the Karma Koala podcast. In this episode, we have Gibran Washington, who runs a company in 3 states, and he'll tell me about that in a sec. And Gibran also runs a podcast with a Pennsylvania senator, which interests me because you're talking a lot about cannabis policy and compliance on that podcast. Gibran, welcome to the Karma Koala podcast. Let's lead into the conversation with your background and the company that you run.
Yeah, so I run Ethos Cannabis now, going on 2 years as CEO. I've been there almost 2.5, almost 3 years. So have joined that organization with the expectations to just come in as vice president of retail, and was able to kind of get some more departments built up underneath me. So within a year, less than a year, I went from VP to CEO to kind of take on this medical-facing cannabis company. We were the first in the country to have a medical partnership with the research hospital at Thomas Jefferson University.
Okay.
And we have been able to, over the last several years, do a lot of good research and a lot of formulations and product lines that have accentuated some of our goals and our missions, which is to make cannabis an appropriate place in society. The origin, you want the origin story of like where it all came from?
Give us a little bit of the origin story, and also the 3 states that you're operating in. You're all East Coast, are you?
We're all East Coast. I guess you would call it Ohio, so Midwest. They wouldn't like to call themselves East Coasters.
Yeah.
But we're in Ohio, we're in Pennsylvania, and we're also in Massachusetts. So that's where we're vertical in all 3 states, but grows in all 3. Kind of got my start in the cannabis industry, kind of a bifurcated perspective, I guess you would say, on what cannabis was. I had a brother in the legacy cannabis market who unfortunately lost his life to cannabis, and I had a father who was a big time executive for a large organization in America. And, he used it to fight cancer. So, I saw this bifurcated exposure to what cannabis was, and cannabis has been part of my regimen or my therapeutic pathway ever since I played basketball in college. I've kind of used that as a supplement to some of those things. So for me, cannabis has kind of been around most of my life, teenage life, and everything else kind of growing up. So I looked at cannabis a little differently than most people. So when I got the opportunity to kind of leave the career that I built in the food and beverage and hospitality industry as an executive, I saw this as a natural merging of skill sets from corporate America and then my very in-depth understanding of the cannabis plant and its use cases.
Well, it's interesting you say you've come from the food and beverage industry, because not so many people have, and I think there's a really obvious connection between the 2 industries. Have you come across a lot of other people who've come across from F&B to cannabis?
Yeah, I feel that, at Ethos, a lot of, I can't speak of a lot of other organizations, but at Ethos, we have a lot of food and beverage, ex-food and beverage people. To your point, it's a natural, what we call progression, I guess you would say, from food and beverage to the cannabis industry. It's a bud tender is very similar to a bartender. It's a very service-centric industry.
Or it should be a service-centric industry.
In our organization, it's a very service-centric approach, just because I believe it's just like the food and beverage business, kind of like you said. People are coming to us to escape something. Some type of ailment from the day or something they're trying to get away from in the day itself, just like you would come to a bar, kind of unload and unleash a little bit. And then, different from a bar, you consume your products as you get from us, in the comforts of your home. But that same interaction at the point of sale is very, very, very similar to what you see in a restaurant bar.
Now, you're a vertically integrated company, of which, not many of the originals have survived. It's been pretty hard for vertically integrated. When with your products, are you what percentage of different types of products are you producing from your initial grow, and what are you finding is working best for you this many years into a regulated market?
So, we're fully vertical. So, we do everything from cultivation all the way to the processing suite. So we have flower products, we have infused products, infused pre-rolls, we have gummies, we have tinctures, we have vape products, and concentrates. So, we kind of have a smorgasbord of all the things. We don't do anything with beverages. We don't feel that that is something that a company like us should be focusing on. We have such a vast array of different product lines that we can go into, where CPG with bottled beverages isn't something that we feel we're designed to do. We're going to leave that for other folk who are specializing in kind of beverage making and kind of
And in
looking to
your
do their thing on
in
that
your
side.
retail, are you selling only your products, or do you have a
No,
range?
we're selling everything. We're
Okay.
selling everything and other competitors in our stores. We sell about 40% of our own products to our consumer base, which is very strong to be able to do and maintain, some outsized market share that we have in all the markets that we're in. So really proud of that to be able to kind of do that and offer those kind of products. And I think what differentiates us is we believe in almost like the five guys concept. We don't want to be good at everything. We want to be good at a few things. So we focus really hard on our flour and the quality and the
That's
genetics
very
where our
nice to
flour
hear,
comes from.
because I always feel as though
Yeah.
there's not enough of that.
There's just not enough, So we're really big on not THC but total TAC. We really want to get all the active cannabinoids going, and in our terpene profiles are pretty extraordinary when you look at some of our genetics and especially a lot of the stuff that we're coming up with recently. And then also in our process suites, we really lean in on solventless and liquid diamonds type of things. So not solventless per se, we dabble more liquid diamonds, live resin products, high quality vape products. Has really been kind of our bread and butter and kind of our mainstay over the last year and a half or so of what you can get to expect from Ethos Cannabis.
Okay, here's a bit of a sideways question, because it's an article I've read
Yeah.
recently. In Forbes recently, there was an
Mhm.
article about some guys who run a lab who provide flavor profiles and scent profiles for cannabis
Oh
products.
yeah, yeah,
And I found that really
yeah. I've heard
interesting.
of them.
Yeah, because I hadn't come across that, and it hadn't even crossed my mind that that would operate in the industry. And I'm just interested, you're running a vertically integrated company. They obviously must have clients. Um, what are your thoughts on that sort of approach? I asked you that because you come from an F&B background, and that's a major part of F&B in the US market.
Yeah, the enhancement, and unfortunately, it is, all the different chemicals we put in our bodies in the States is pretty astonishing.
I
But
know, well, it's pretty scary,
um,
because every time I go, my stomach doesn't do well.
oh, I'm sure your stomach doesn't do well when you come to the States. The stuff we put in our bodies here is insane. But we when you talk about the cannabis plan and the article that you referenced in Forbes, we feel at Ethos, we're purists. We don't remediate, so we definitely wouldn't add terpenes or flavor profiles to the cannabis. We believe in letting the cannabis express itself fully, and that's done through the age-old techniques of agriculture. So if you till the plant right and you treat the plant the right way, those flavor profiles that you're trying to manufacture in the lab, you should be able to naturally create them in the plant itself.
Exactly.
So you feel very confident that we don't do all that extra stuff to get products to sell. If it doesn't pass testing, we don't sell it. We don't try to remediate it like a lot of companies do, or microwave it as I call it, to get it to pass testing. We'll send it to the processing seed and we'll blow it out through that way, but we won't put it in a jar or a bag to try to make a profit. If you treat the plant right, the plant will treat you right. So, to answer your question very directly, hell no. We would
Well,
never in a
that's what I
million
like to hear.
years
But I mean,
put
were you sort
terpenes.
of surprised when you came across that development? But look,
No, not at
I'm not
all.
in the US, so I'm not,
Yeah.
and I'm not in the
I,
game, so to speak. So for me,
mm.
maybe I'm too naive, but I don't expect to see people
Well, I
doing.
think that in any industry, especially in the cannabis industry, you have a lot of individuals who got in for I think some of the wrong reasons. We started this company, to help people and patients, and we believe in the medical efficacy of the cannabis plant. There's a lot of the vast majority of companies that came into the cannabis space trying to get rich fast. So they have prioritized profit over quality. And when you do that, you allow yourself the um, ability or the lack of insight to let things like terpene sprays and things like that come into your profile because you're trying to maximize profit instead of understanding where the mission was, which was to provide a medicine to a group of people who are in dire need to get off pharmaceuticals and other ailments that cannabis can help with. So I think the companies that went in with that mindset of, the purity of what cannabis can be for a community, we would never in a million years, as we call the cannabis culture in a million years, we would never go for that. It is the PE firms and the larger organizations who have prioritized profit, large scale grows, which, at Ethos, we don't believe in, 100,000 square foot canopies. You can't grow good weed or
Yeah.
good cannabis in a 100,000 square foot canopy. It takes a lot more love than that to be able to grow it like it's a strawberry. So I think those companies, no, they don't surprise me. For a lot of the corners that they cut, a lot of the things that they've done to the industry. I mean, I hold them personally responsible, the larger corporations in cannabis, of making the THC craze a conversation where, no one was talking about THC before we got into, I would call the regulated cannabis space. It was really looks, taste, effects, and smell. That is how you judge good cannabis, prior to 2018. So, I think they have done a lot of things. I think this is another extension of some of the missteps that, some of the large organizations have taken because they don't understand the cannabis plant. They thought it was a commodity. They thought it was a banana or an apple or an orange. And, people didn't care, didn't know any different. Cannabis is cannabis. And I think anyone that thought that is quickly learning that this plant is a lot more complicated, a lot more delicate than they ever would have imagined.
I mean, look, I'm a legal podcast, so I'm going to ask you some boring questions now about
Yeah.
running a medium-sized MSO across 3 states. What are you finding at the moment that are the main issues for you in terms of compliance?
Well, I mean, I think from a compliance standpoint, I think, in all cannabis, states that we operate in and colleagues that I kind of conversate with, our biggest frustration isn't necessarily the regulations. It is the lack of consistent enforcement of said regulations. So, as a company like ours who tries to do all the things
That's my
the right
major
way.
bugbear reporting these guys is the regulators are great at sending out positive press releases about themselves, but it seems behind the scenes it's
Oh, they're a mess.
organized chaos.
It's
It's
tough.
probably too polite.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it varies from regulatory authority to regulatory authority. I mean, I think, to their credit, they're working in an industry where they're undermanned, and they're well behind the 8 ball in terms of understanding what the industry is. I mean, I think in an emerging industry like this, they have to become more engaged, I think, with the operators actually doing it. I think what we're finding versus other regulators in other industries, they may have 25, 30 years experience in this industry and dealing with whatever topics may come up. What we're finding is a lot of times in cannabis, you have folk that have never tried cannabis, never been around cannabis, and now they're trying to regulate it. So I think it's a culture shock for a lot of them, and they don't know where to go, what to do, and
Well,
how
and
to
also they've been
equitably
given
be able
rules
to
and
enforce it.
regulations by people who are exactly the same. The legislators are exactly the same as them. Most of them, they've never tried it
Right.
or are aware of it, so they're handed down
Or aware of it.
rules to work with. So it's sort of a double whammy, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, it's truly a double whammy when you look at, from a compliance standpoint. Some of the stuff doesn't make sense. Why would you do it this way? Why do you have to do it this way? But, I think they're learning. I think they're evolving over time. I think the biggest, obstacle in front of a medium-sized, large-size, or small-size cannabis company, especially in the States, is 280E, and our lack of access to actual capital. I think, when you start to underburden us with taxes, the abilities for us to be able to build this industry and grow this industry will just happen organically. I mean, right now, we're in a quagmire, I guess you would say. We're in a tough spot, because about $60 billion is going to come due in loans next year in the cannabis industry, and we're seeing our AR balances grow, day over day because people don't have the cash to pay. So I think getting capital into the industry is far more of a concern for the health of the industry than any regulatory body that currently exists. I mean, all of them have been open to understanding that they don't know everything and they need an opportunity to grow and develop and evolve themselves. But, we just would love equitable enforcement, but, you can't do it when you don't have enough people to actually enforce what you're asking them to enforce. There's more of us than them in every state that I operate in. So it's very difficult for a group of 5 or 6 people to really ascertain what's going on in an industry where it's moving at the lightning speed, and they're just trying to keep up.
So go back to 280E, which sort of leads to
Mhm.
my next question. Washington, as in DC, rescheduling, obviously it does matter because that's how we're going to affect 280E. But in terms of the new administration, how are you feeling as a guy running a business that they're going to treat the industry as it is at the moment? And do you think it's on their radar to care about for at least the next sort of 6 to 8 months? Now these hearings have been postponed, and the more I think about it, the word indefinitely seems to come into play.
I guess it's strange to say, but we're kind of agnostic to it all. We have had our hopes up and crushed several times over the last few years. So,
You're not the
from
first
safe
operator who said
banking
that to
to
me, and you won't be the
from
last.
280 to rescheduling to legalization and all the other kind of things. I mean, we have to run the business as if nothing changes. I think some of the things you said in the latter part of your question is very accurate. I think President Trump and his administration have a full plate, and they have to figure out where they're going to spend their political capital to get things done. And I don't know how much political capital you want to spend on cannabis, as you are now trying to get immigration together and food
Not a lot, I should
prices and
imagine.
a lot of irons in the fire, as they say, as he's trying to get done. And I frankly don't think cannabis is high on that priority list. But I think that if the RFK and the HHS secretary pick, if the conversation in America is going to be about make America healthy again, if that truly is going to be part of their focus, then yeah, I do believe cannabis has to become part of that conversation very quickly. Because pharmaceuticals and being from overseas, and you seem like you travel a lot, the amount of medicines that Americans are on is insane. The amount of
I
side
think
effects that come from these medicines
beyond insane. I
is
mean
insane.
that's the other thing about
Yeah.
it wasn't just the food. I would have to bring my aspirin from the UK or from Australia
Oh,
when
yeah.
I was living in the States, because if I put anything from CVS down me, I felt sick for the next 2 weeks.
It's all the extra stuff and the fillers and the binders that we use here in this country that other countries won't even let that get to their border. So I think if we're really going to make a conscious effort to make America healthy again, I think cannabis has to be part of the dialogue because pain is still going to be existing. Sleep is still going to be an issue. I think some of the other ailments that we know that it helps with, anxiety. These are still going to be things that if you're looking for an alternative to Western pharmaceuticals, this is a much healthier option. And I think now that you can ingest it, not just inhaling it through your lungs, you can ingest it in many different forms now. I think it is a natural alternative to a safer and a healthier pathway forward for a lot of Americans. And that's what we're hoping on. But again, we got to see if we can get through this confirmation hearing today, and see if that really becomes to fruition, that we make it a true stride to try to make it our larger population a healthier population.
And do you think, if we move back to the States, there's always now in every sitting of every house around the country, apart from your South Dakotas, they're always tinkering with the legislation and thinking about it and talking about it. Do you think that's where the strength lies in the future for creating regulations for cannabis federally? Because by the time it rolls round to federal, the states will have been, you're never more than 80% of the way there in the way that US democracy works and US policy works. But do you think the states in the end will be doing most of the legwork for the center?
I think so, and we're hoping that it does stay somewhat state restricted. I think interstate commerce. I think when you go to national legalization, I think you allow Amazons and some of the other larger players to kind of get involved, and I think you get into that, what I would call the Walmart of cannabis, and that's not something that we want to see the industry go to. So I think the states kind of really trying to figure out how they build each one out, then taking some best practices once it becomes federal, but allowing states to regulate their own markets, similar to what in America they do with alcohol. States are regulating how they dispense alcohol. in every state in the United States. So, I think there's some similarities that can be learned from, having a good state-based industry and protecting that state-based industry and not allowing it to be too national. So, we think that there's an opportunity there, but we also believe in the evolution of law, right? I mean, I think, every time that, you're in any state, country, or whatever it may be, you're hoping
that
that
the
the
law,
legislators are going to continue to evolve. I will say that for us as a country, I think it is a little archaic that we have the oldest constitution in the world. And that's a crazy thing to say when we're one of the youngest countries in the world. So as much evolution as we've done as a country in terms of writing some of these cannabis laws, I would love to see us really take a wholesale approach to how the country is run and how we're going to do certain things. Because again, I mean, being a country this young and having the oldest constitution in the world, I mean, it just doesn't even sound right.
talking about the planet, so to speak, you're an SME, you run across 3 states. I presume you want to grow across a few more. Canada has the monopoly on export from North America to
Yeah.
medical markets, because most other markets around the world are wanting to grow medically. You're
Mhm.
obviously the sort of company that's what you want to specialize in. Therefore,
Yeah.
do you feel as though you're being denied access to international markets, or do you just feel that, like a lot of other industries, the US market is big enough, it'll keep us running for the next 10 years? What are your thoughts, when you're sitting down with the senator in your podcast and you're talking about these sorts of issues? Do you feel like you're worried that you might be left out of an international sort of framework that might appear from other quarters? How I just have no sense of that in the US, because whenever I'm talking to people about cannabis, it's the US market is so huge. It's like any other market that there's not much thought about exporting knowledge, yes, but not exporting product.
I'll do a little tongue-in-cheek response to that. I mean, I think, the United States, whether it's legal or illegal, we are the largest consumers of medicine in the world. So,
You
we
certainly
feel as
are.
though we have we feel as though we have a solid client base that, has a need or demand rather for different alternative medicines than maybe that we're currently offering in the States. When we look at the globalization of cannabis, we're not overly concerned about, Canada having first crack at, being in the medical market. We see that, the country they're exporting to, at some point will catch up and they'll grow their own cannabis. Like it's probably already being grown illegally in their country. And their markets themselves will continue to develop and mature themselves. So I think the best route for a company like ours would be to try to set up in another country and build it from the inside out versus importing, exporting and importing product into a country. So we're not, there's not a lot of fear or concern as it relates to us being left behind because Canada's being able to export cannabis. In terms of the cannabis culture, cannabis has been known to have solid, what we call BC nugs, but the quality of cannabis was always south of them in the States and Mexico and things of that nature. So when the time comes for high quality cannabis, that's still going to come from the States. And we can quickly catch up and close that gap when some of the larger corporations, Curaleaves and things of that nature, really start to lean in on quality and the quality of the genetics that kind of exist in the continental USA. When they figure out how to do that on a global scale, you'll see that natural gap start to close. But right now, no, we're not overly concerned. There's enough business here. There's enough things in the cannabis industry in the States that we're trying to get right, that we're trying to build out the right way before we, get ahead of our skis. We think that's the failure of a lot of large organizations that are failing now, is they want to be everywhere and do everything instead of focusing on going deeper with the areas that you are instead of wide. So we'll stick to that approach, and we're glad of anyone who's starting to continue the cannabis conversation in markets we're not in yet.
So you seem a pretty positive guy.
I
You're
try to be.
well, for the first time in my life, I've come across quite a lot of North Americans who aren't so positive about life as they were 5, 10, or 15 years ago. So it's great to see somebody feeling, You have the American spirit within you still, which is great to hear.
Oh, no
What
doubt.
what do you feel about your business over the next sort of 18 months? Do you think that in 18 months time you're going to be double the size? You're going to have a bigger market? How do you feel your growth now we're into this new administration? It is what it is. Time to move on. Are you feeling, bar the politics, are you feeling pretty positive about moving forward?
Yeah, I think the approach that we've taken here at our organization is we were planning that as if nothing changed. So I think that legally or regulatory wise over the last several years, we've kind of kept that same focus. So the where we find ourselves at today is in a very unique opportunity where we have capital and we're flowing positive cash flow. So we're looking to grow, and that's kind of been our focus, whether that's twice the size, three times the size, 10 times the size. We won't put a cap on what that growth looks like. But we do feel the next 18 months, there's going to be a lot of distressed assets in the marketplaces that we play in or marketplaces that we don't
Yeah, I
play
was
in.
just look, I
And we
was
see
just
those
having that
opportunities.
conversation with somebody in California this morning. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's where there's a lot of distressed assets,
there's a lot of distressed
more than
assets.
then
Yeah.
can be purchased, it seems almost at the moment.
That's exactly what it seems at the moment. And, I think that for those on the outside, maybe looking in, some of the companies that you all think are doing great, MSOs, large publicly traded MSOs, they're struggling a lot. They're running out of cash. So I think it will be a very interesting next 18 months for companies like ours who have the capital, have the backing financially to make some strategic moves to build out, our core business in a way that's, going to accentuate, who we're trying to be. We're still figuring
Do you
out, do
think
we
like
want to
maybe
be
the first American, I don't feel as yet that the first US brand for cannabis has really set itself in the world like an Apple or a Nike? Or do you think out of this generation of businesses like yours who have grown, grown from the bottom up, and you're vertically integrated, others may not be. Do you think this is really where the first generation of real cannabis companies are going to be coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the outliers. I don't believe in all the brand bullshit that everybody talks about. I think there's something called brand recognition, but there's no brand loyalty in cannabis. If you go back to its origins, cannabis is a white label product and it's been that way for hundreds of years. So trying to put a brand on something is a good luck. But Coca-Cola is a brand because every time you get Coca-Cola, it's a recipe that you get at the same time every time. I would think of cannabis more in the vein of an orange. Do you know what type of oranges you buy? What kind of apples you buy? I think what the people are going to look for is high quality products, regardless of brand name. And I think that has to be the focus for our industry. I think a lot of people have failed gloriously, over the last several years building these brands. But once you take that brand out of that state, how does it do? It doesn't do well. I mean, if you gave me the number one edible brand in America, which is Wild Gummies, and I put it
Well,
on my
I'm
menu
glad
for
you know
six
that because
months,
I didn't know that.
it's Wild Gummies. So you put them on my menu for 6 months. I'll learn the recipe. I'll take them off my menu, put something else, and put my name on it. It's going to sell the same amount as the Wild Gummy did. So that just shows you there's no loyalty to a brand. And people are learning that about cannabis and cannabis consumers. Like we've never cared about the brand.
No.
I don't care if it's cookies or
As long
not.
as
It's oh,
as
cookies.
long as it smells good, is good, and
There it
does good.
is. And I've been around the world using cannabis. And no one has, been able to show me that, oh, this is our brand. I have 2,000 genetics, seeds in my library in Pennsylvania. We right now have 87 different types of genetics, 117 different strains, just in one of our facilities. Like, how do you get someone to understand what that means from a brand standpoint? Because Nike brand, there are consistent things that you're looking for from a effects, from a wear, from a feel. Cannabis is so volatile, it's so diverse that I've never been the guy to believe in the brand loyalty, brand recognition without a doubt. There's no brand loyalty that I think anyone is actually getting. And I think they're all learning that. A lot of these companies that, said, I am a brand, come buy my brand, ask them how they're doing financially right now. They're all struggling from, the big, I won't name any names, but from the big, edible brands to the small edible brands. If they've gone across the country to try to maximize their brand and their brand influence, they're failing. They're